Christmas Eve wrapped New York City in a quiet kind of magic. Snow drifted gently between tall buildings, softening the usual noise of traffic and turning the streets into long white ribbons of light. Store windows glowed with decorations, but far from the crowds, in a small park near Fifth Avenue, a man sat alone on a cold iron bench. His name was Daniel Wright, a CEO whose face appeared on magazine covers and business channels, yet tonight, no one recognized him. He wore a long black coat, expensive but lifeless, just like the silence around him. Daniel stared at his phone, scrolling through messages he never answered and contacts he no longer called. Board meetings, contracts, profits, he had mastered all of them. But as the city prepared to celebrate love and family, his heart felt painfully empty. His parents were gone, his marriage had ended years ago, and friendships had faded into polite emails. The success he once chased now sat heavy on his chest. Without realizing it, his eyes filled with tears. That was when a small voice cut through the cold air. "Mister, are you okay?" Daniel looked up, surprised. In front of him stood a little girl, no more than 7 years old. She wore a red wool coat that looked slightly too big for her and a white scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. In her hands was a small paper bag, folded carefully at the top. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her eyes were warm and curious. "I didn't mean to stare," she said quickly, "but my mom says when someone looks sad on Christmas, they might need help." Daniel tried to smile, but it came out weak. "I'm fine," he replied softly, though both of them knew it wasn't true. The girl tilted her head, studying him seriously, the way children do when they believe honesty is important. Then she stepped closer and held out the paper bag. "We made cookies," she said proudly. "They're not fancy, but they make people feel better." Daniel hesitated, then took the bag. The warmth of the cookies surprised him more than the gesture itself. "Thank you," he whispered. She climbed onto the bench beside him without asking, her feet swinging above the snow. After a moment of silence, she leaned closer and said in a hushed, serious voice, "Don't cry, mister, you can borrow my mom." Daniel blinked, confused. "Borrow your mom?" She nodded confidently. "Yes. When I'm sad, my mom makes hot chocolate and listens. She's really good at listening. And it's Christmas, so sharing is allowed." For the first time that night, Daniel let out a quiet laugh, shaky but real. The sound felt unfamiliar, like using a muscle he had forgotten he had. He wiped his eyes and looked at the little girl, whose kindness felt bigger than the city around them. Before he could respond, footsteps approached through the snow. A woman hurried toward them, worry written on her face. "Emma," she called gently, "I told you not to wander off." The little girl jumped down. "It's okay, Mom," she said brightly, pointing at Daniel. He just needed a cookie. Daniel stood up, his heart unexpectedly lighter. He didn't know it yet, but this small interruption on a lonely Christmas Eve was about to change. Emma's mother reached the bench, brushing snow from her gloves as she looked apologetically at Daniel. "I'm so sorry," she said. "She has a big heart and sometimes forgets about boundaries." Daniel shook his head quickly. "Please, don't apologize," he replied. "She helped more than you know." The woman smiled politely, though there was a tired softness in her eyes. She introduced herself as Sarah. Up close, Daniel noticed how simple her coat was compared to the luxury brands he was used to seeing, yet there was a calm confidence about her that felt grounding. Emma stood between them, holding her mother's hand proudly, as if she had just completed an important mission. "We were just heading home," Sarah said. "It's getting colder." Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, you have to make hot chocolate," she whispered loudly. "Like I told him." Sarah looked embarrassed, but Daniel found himself smiling again. "That actually sounds perfect," he said before he could stop himself. Then he paused, unsure if he had crossed a line. "I mean, only if it's not too much trouble." Sarah studied his face for a moment. Perhaps she saw the loneliness behind his composed appearance, or maybe it was simply the spirit of Christmas Eve. "Well," she said gently, "we live just across the street. It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome to join us for a cup." They walked together through the softly falling snow. Emma skipped ahead, leaving small footprints that quickly disappeared. Daniel felt strange, stepping into this quiet, ordinary moment. No cameras, no assistants, no expectations, just a simple walk with two strangers who felt oddly familiar. Sarah's apartment was small but warm. A tiny Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper stars and mismatched ornaments. The smell of cocoa soon filled the air as Sarah moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. Emma sat on the floor, humming while arranging gift boxes made from reused wrapping paper. Daniel sat on the couch, holding a steaming mug, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, comfort. Sarah sat across from him, and for a while, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. "My dad says Christmas is about being together," Emma said suddenly. "Even if you don't know each other yet." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked down at the mug in his hands. "Your dad sounds wise," he said. Sarah's smile softened, a hint of sadness passing through her eyes. "He passed away 2 years ago," she said quietly. "But we try to keep his words alive." Daniel nodded, understanding more than he could explain. He realized then that everyone carried their own losses, their own quiet pain. The difference was how they chose to face it. As the clock ticked toward midnight, laughter slowly replaced silence. Emma told stories, Sarah shared simple memories, and Daniel found himself opening up, speaking honestly without fear of judgment. That night, in a small apartment on Christmas Eve, a lonely CEO began to remember what it meant to belong. Midnight passed quietly, marked only by the soft ticking of the clock and the distant sound of church bells echoing through the city. Snow continued to fall outside Sarah's apartment window, covering the streets in a clean, peaceful white. Emma had curled up on the couch, her head resting against her mother's arm, slowly drifting to sleep. Daniel watched her for a moment, feeling a strange warmth in his chest, something close to peace. "I should probably go," Daniel said softly, not wanting to disturb the calm. "Thank you for everything. Tonight meant more to me than I can explain." Sarah smiled, wrapping a blanket around Emma. "Sometimes," she replied, "people just need a place to sit and breathe." "I'm glad we could offer that." Daniel stood near the door, hesitating. For a man who made billion-dollar decisions without blinking, saying goodbye felt surprisingly difficult. He reached into his pocket, then stopped himself. For once, he didn't want to solve something with money. Instead, he looked at Sarah honestly. "I'd like to see you both again," he said. "Not as a CEO. Just as Daniel." Sarah considered his words, then nodded. "We'd like that." Outside, the cold air felt different, less sharp, less lonely. Daniel walked slowly, replaying the evening in his mind. Emma's fearless kindness, Sarah's quiet strength, the simple joy of sharing. Cocoa and stories. He realized how long he had been living behind walls built from work and ambition. The next morning, Christmas Day, Daniel woke up in his penthouse with sunlight pouring through the windows. For the first time in years, the space didn't feel like a trophy, it felt empty. He picked up his phone and made a call he had delayed for months, then another. Apologies came first, then plans to reconnect. By afternoon, he was back at his office, not for meetings, but to write. He reviewed company policies, scholarship programs, and community projects that had been ignored. Emma's voice echoed in his mind. "Sharing is allowed." He smiled and signed off on initiatives that would help families, children, and single parents struggling through the winter. A few days later, Daniel visited Sarah and Emma again, this time carrying groceries instead of gifts. They laughed, cooked together, and slowly built something real: trust, friendship, and a sense of belonging. The city outside remained busy and cold, but inside that small apartment, warmth lived freely. Daniel never forgot that Christmas Eve. It reminded him that success without connection is a quiet kind of failure. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is a cookie, a kind word, and a little girl brave enough to offer her mom to a stranger who forgot how to feel whole.